So, Yamina, we're back today and we're going to talk about chapter 2 in your book. So we're talking about classroom environment today. So you talk about classroom environment and it playing a key role in how students thrive. What do you think are some of the specific changes teachers can make to ensure that they've fostered a positive environment?
I love that. Thank you for that question. I think a key thing is relationships and building relationships with young people and finding ways to build that in an organic way where it doesn't feel forced. One of the kind of bits of advice I give in the book is actually finding opportunities to build those relationships outside of the classroom. So spending time on duty, actually interacting with the young people, not just standing there in silence, but actually talking to them, finding out more about them, finding them at lunchtime almost, spending some time with them, building relationships with their form tutors to learn more about them. And I think bringing that then into the classroom to have that commonality and that interaction is really, really key. I think also a key part of a thriving classroom environment is behaviour and really important routines. So ensuring that you've got really clear structures and routines in your classroom, I think is key to any thriving classroom, because you can't do all the other hard stuff around like debates and engaging activities and things like that unless you've got those routines down. Mm-hmm. And I talk about how you might do that in the classroom and really leaning into policies that the school might have around behaviour and rewards and sanctions, but also creating them. So for example, if you're in a primary school, like co-contracting that with the young people, creating a success criteria of what effective kind of behaviour looks like and really building that relationship with the young people and having that as almost like a contract in the classroom. You could do that with your form groups, if you're a form tutor, so that you can then go back to that and say, you know, in real life, you'll have a contract in how you're expected to behave and act in a workplace. Why not start that with the young people in the classroom? So those are kind of some of the things that I talk about, but also really thinking about your lesson planning. I think part of a thriving classroom is thinking really carefully about the young people in your classroom and planning lessons that really adhere and to their needs. And that doesn't mean differentiating 3 different ways like we used in the old days. So 3 different worksheets, but actually really thinking about adaptive teaching and knowing those young people. And one activity that I talk about, and this is from Amjad Ali's Classroom Toolkit, you can find that online, is actually having the first time you meet them, having a little worksheet that asks them more about themselves as learners. Tell me something that you want me to know about you as a learner. Which part of the subject do you find really fun and exciting? What do you find really hard? And actually leaning into that and using that. And that can be anonymous, but I love it when the students tell me who they are, because I can then try and embed that within the lesson plans and also really making sure that I know who the learners are. And at Institute of Education, the motto was, who are the learners and what do they know? And that's, I think, a really key part of thinking about a thriving classroom environment.
Yeah, so you're sort of touching upon this idea that you talk about empowering the students. Kind of long term throughout the year then, how do you strike that balance between students having autonomy in the classroom, but the teacher also being able to provide that guidance?
I love that. I think there's a real kind of importance in the teacher expertise, and direct instruction absolutely has a place where we will just need to tell students stuff. Like, we're the expert, we would just need to give them information about the Shakespearean context, about the historical context, about Macbeth, for example, but also giving students ownership to develop that knowledge themselves. So once we've perhaps shared that knowledge through direct instruction, giving them autonomy to be able to do things with that knowledge, to be able to apply that knowledge, to be able to explore that knowledge. And I love flipped learning. So perhaps setting a homework piece that tells them to go and do a bit of research and gives them really clear guidance on what that might look like, and getting them to do like a 1-pager where they have to come back and present that 1-pager. So that it's not that it's discovery learning, but ultimately I've really structured the learning, and that happens throughout the year where they're in control of that learning. Then they take that learning away, and I love creating 1-pagers or like research papers like we used to do at university, because then the students have to take that knowledge and put into a really concise like presentation or a document and then share that. And that independent learning, I think, is really important. But the preface is that, or the disclaimer is that you have to have shared that knowledge, and they have to have that in their schema and their mental models to then be able to do something with that information. So kind of that independent learning can only work, I think, if you've given them some of that knowledge and they've done something with that knowledge to then be able to then share that knowledge on a wider scale in the classroom. And students love that. So I talk about things like Socratic seminars and really giving students the opportunity to grapple with the text. As an English teacher, that's something I love doing, is hearing what their ideas are before I tell them what my ideas might be. I think there's a real power in English to be able to do that, where you give them an extract from, Macbeth's soliloquy, or you give them an equation in maths, for example, and you put them into groups where they have to then decipher that information. They have to share their ideas. But all of those things are based on effective routines, really clear kind of instructions from the teacher, and really importantly, relationships. Because if you haven't built that relationship with those young people in the classroom, one, there's no clarity about what your expectations are, and two, that might go like it could just go anywhere. And actually what you want to do is create a structure where there's routines, but then when you let them and you give them autonomy, they're able to kind of thrive in those routines. I think that's really important, almost like a tight, loose approach, I guess, to the classroom environment.
Okay, so I guess this is for any teacher, really, not just for young teachers, but would you suggest that teachers talk to their pupils just as much about the subject, so English, but also about how they are developing their emotional intelligence as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think sometimes we think that's just based for the form tutor and it's a PSHE lesson, but ultimately as teachers, we're also regulators of emotions, and we're always thinking about those young people's emotions because they bring those in, just like we bring those in as adults. If we've had a really rough night's sleep, that's going to come with us in the classroom, and it's being able to help our young people kind of emotionally manage that. Talking to them about those emotions is really important. I think a key part of that is a psychologically safe environment. And we talk about that in terms of leadership, but we rarely talk about it in terms of classroom. And there's a lot of talk about belonging in the classroom, right, recently with Bridget Phillipson talking about it. But I think that's a really powerful thing to do, is by creating psychological safety, you're saying to students, it's okay to make mistakes. You're safe here if you do make a mistake. It's okay to feel emotions, but it's about how we support you to regulate those emotions. And if we talk openly with our young people about how we might be feeling, that's not like TMI, not too much information, but just because, you know what, tonight I didn't get a really good night's sleep, so I'm feeling a little bit rough, everybody. So just bear with me, be patient with me. That signals to them that, oh, if Miss Beebe's feeling like that, oh, I'm feeling a little bit rough as well. Oh, that's okay. And that is a really important kind of part of a thriving classroom, is that students feel safe to make mistakes, but they also feel safe, know that they're going to be seen, they're going to be valued, they're going to be recognised. And you can't do those things unless you as the teacher model that and signal that to them and create that safe environment.
Yeah, so you're talking about, it's not just about the teacher thriving in the classroom, is it? It's the pupil thriving in the classroom as well. So I guess number one would be ensuring that your pupils have a safe space. But what other strategies do you think a teacher should adopt for their pupils' well-being in the classroom?
Yeah, so like being open and honest and vulnerable with your own emotions. I also get students to sometimes share how they're feeling. So in coaching, we talk about scaling. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling? How likely are you to do that? And metacognition plays a really important role, I think, in this. We can talk about it in terms of learners and how they see the learning themselves. But also you can talk about it on a scale of, how are you feeling in terms of approaching this particular content? Or how are you feeling that you're going to have to work in this group? Tell me more about what might be stopping you from engaging in this group work. Because that kind of open conversation, again, we think is only for adults. Like on a scale of 1 to 5, how likely are you to engage in this pair work right now? Tell me what might be stopping you. Or, Miss, actually, I don't have a really good relationship with this student. They're starting to open up. And I think creating that safe space and giving students the right to say, I don't feel great, or I'm actually feeling like this and this is the reason why, gives you space as well as a teacher to thrive. Because unless the students are thriving and succeeding, I don't think that you feel that sense of reward and value that comes with, I think, young people thriving in our classrooms.
So what about the sort of challenges and high pressure situations? So, I mean, earlier we were talking about year 11. How as a teacher can you help them to thrive even when they are under pressure?
This is where I think routines are so important, but also teaching students about those pressures, understanding that life is full of those pressures, right? We rarely, I think, talk to them about how to manage those kind of high pressure situations like we might do with adults. We talk a lot about adult workload and well-being. Do we do that with the young people? I think PSHE and Form Time is a really great way of doing that as a whole school, actually, as a whole school approach, having a curriculum that really thinks about how young people, particularly under pressured situations, might kind of lean into those routines. I also think explicitly teaching them things that helps them manage their anxiety, manage their stress is really important. So explicitly teaching strategies that help them understand themselves. You know, if you are feeling quite panicked, what could you do? Like focus on your breathing. How might you focus on your breathing? Really explicitly teaching them strategies, I think, is a really powerful thing that we can do as teachers and leaders to support those young people, but not waiting until year 11. Yeah. Right from the beginning, year 7, say, what are you feeling when you see this paper? What do you feel when you are in a kind of whole classroom environment and your teacher says you need to speak? Like even those sorts of opportunities, when I say think, pair, share, how does that make you feel? Okay, let's think about strategies that might support you. Would it help if I gave you a post-it and you had to write your answer down first? And when I ask you, you just read from the post-it. Would that be a strategy that might help? But we have to teach that to our young people, and we have to know it ourselves. What are those effective learning strategies that they can lean onto, like things like flashcards, you know, really thinking about their revision timetable, using spaced leave and interleaving, like really thinking about those strategies that they can use, that when they are feeling the pressure, they can lean into and say, okay, do you know what? I'm feeling really panicky. I feel like I haven't revised. Well, what can I do? Okay, I know about this strategy called interleaving. Let me go back into that and let me try that, and help them kind of regulate themselves. Mm-hmm. But it's hard. It's really hard being a teenager now, I think.
Really hard. So if you're a young teacher, quite new to teaching, obviously you can measure the success that you've had with the grades and the outcomes, but how can you measure whether you've created a classroom where your pupils are thriving in their well-being and those sorts of areas?
I think there's really great ways of you can do that. There's actually organisations like Wellio, Life Lessons that do fantastic kind of PSHE surveys. I think you could do a before and after survey potentially. Mm-hmm. So like we always think about it in terms of research, but why not try that with our young people? When I used to do action research, that's one of the first things I would do is gather the information before I've done any strategy or applied any strategy, and ask them more about, and use scaling, things like on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about this, and no more than 5 or 6 questions, I would say. Yeah. And then do that again once you've applied some strategies, you've tried it, you've refined it, or you've ditched it, you then actually go back at the end and say, tell me about how you're feeling now, and do it that way. But also just qualitative data. Speak to the students, talk to them. What have they found really helpful about what you've tried or what you've shared with them? And what do you think that they could do, that you could do even better to support them? And actually asking them, what does support look like to you? Because sometimes I think we assume that it means the same for every teenager, but teenagers are different and they're all in different kind of areas and levels and degrees, and actually we need to be able to talk to those young people on a one-to-one basis. And I do think form time is a really important time to be able to do that. But as a teacher of a subject, you can also do that at the beginning or end of a class, or when you're doing your teacher circulation and you notice the student's head down, speak to them. Do you want to have a, should we go down on your knees if you need to, like, and actually go down onto their level and say, is everything okay? Like, do you need a chat? Feel free to stay behind if you want to have a chat. And having that kind of one-to-one conversation in a discreet way might be a powerful way of having kind of quantifying that as well.
Fab. So finally, on this one, if you've got an ECT today who's reflecting on their practice and thinking, actually, I need to do more of this, what's the first thing, what's the one thing they could go away and do straight away today? One small change that could have a big impact.
I would say building those relationships. So outside of your classroom, go out, go on duty. Even if you're not on duty, go and find those, particularly those challenging students, and build those relationships. Ask them about their weekend. Then go back and say, oh, how was your weekend? Like, I remember you said you did this. How did that go? Almost like you do with a leader, right? Yeah. But genuinely, like, build those authentic connections with the young people. And remember the things they tell you, because they value that more than you could ever know. If they tell you that their sister was unwell and they had to, or their baby sister was just born and they're not having to look after that, go back and say, how's your sister doing? I remember you saying, how's that? Because that authentic relationship is it's going to come back into the classroom and is going to work on your behalf, and you're going to be able to kind of build that relationship with the young people. And I just personally love it. Like, I think that one of the best things about teaching is building those authentic relationships with young people, because you'll see that after school or outside of your lesson, they'll want to come and see you and approach you.
Yeah.
And that is the best feeling in the world, like really. And you can't do that just in the classroom, I think. I think you have to go out and build those relationships.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.